and welcome to Media Mac. This is week 15, and for those of you in the class, this is the final episode of the semester. We have made it. I'm Dr. Shermak. Thanks so much for joining. Before we go any further, some quick housekeeping. So this week, for those of you in class, you have the final exam. All right, that is now open as you are listening to this, and that is open through May 22nd at 11:59 p.m. Keep in mind, it is not a cumulative exam. It is over the second half. It only covers, it covers that second half. And I think that makes this episode kind of helpful in a sense, in that there's going to be a little bit of review, because a lot of what I'm talking about today came from the second half. That said, this episode's a little weird because there isn't really a textbook chapter to anchor it to. There's no quiz. There's no discussion board. I'm kind of looking at this as my walk-off episode, all right? And I've been thinking about, what do I leave the listeners and the students with as we conclude the semester? And I'll tell you, this summer I'm teaching this class in the 6-week session. So there will be more episodes of Media Mac, and then we'll take a little end of summer hiatus before we come back in the fall. I might throw something out there if it hits me. But I really want to leave you with some thoughts as we reflect back on the semester, and some things to take away here. And I think one of the biggest things that I've been thinking about this entire semester is AI. And how do we not? Artificial intelligence. I get more questions about AI than really anything. When I tell people I teach journalism, I always get must be tough these days. And yeah, it is. But I get a lot of AI questions as well. And so, I've talked to you about it a little bit already. I've kind of spoken my truth about it, but I really want to come back to it today and underscore some things related to AI. Because look, AI is being used in journalism right now. This very moment today, it's here. There are newsrooms deploying it in ways that you can see and in other ways that you don't see. And it's at some of the biggest news names in this entire country, and also some of the smallest, more community outlets that you may never have heard of. So I think the question we should be asking is not whether to engage with it, because the technology is already there. And I think the question we need to ask is how. And we need to ask this question not only in journalism, but I also think in education. I want to talk through some things that have sort of stuck with me as I have evolved throughout this semester, related to class, unrelated to class, so on and so forth. So there are plenty of areas where AI is actually helping in journalism. An example I love from 2025, the Boyle Heights Beat, a local newspaper out of LA, they used AI during the wildfires there in Los Angeles to translate their coverage into Spanish. And we got to be really careful when we do that, right? There's no doubt. But in a moment of emergency, when they needed those real-time translations, you can make an argument that it saved the community. You maybe could make an argument it saved lives, right? There's a tool out there called Local Lens. This transcribes city council meetings so small newsrooms can cover government even if they don't have the staff to physically attend. Now, I think this is great because it's bringing something. Obviously, the best practice would be to have someone at those meetings. I just want to point out these couple of examples because they get lost in the discussion, right? We are using an AI bot at the Questonian, our student newspaper at Cuesta College, that actually kind of synthesizes meeting agendas and even meeting minutes to kind of pull story ideas. Now, granted, we want people to go. Sometimes students can't go. They're doing a whole bunch of other things, jobs, other classes, so on and so forth. So we put that together. One of the challenges here in trying to sell you on AI, and I don't know if I'm really doing that, but at least to show you that AI is being used in journalism, is that we have a lot of bad examples, right? I talked earlier this semester about Gannett. They tried to use AI to write high school sports recaps. and the quality was so bad and the readers were like, of course this is AI. They just pulled the plug on it, right? I mentioned, I think last episode about the Cleveland Plain Dealer, where there were reporters doing the interviews and doing the human work, but then they just fed those notes to AI and AI tried to write the article, and that was also kind of bad. I can't get behind that because I don't think that's a good use of AI, because you need the writer in there to make the journalistic choices. So if AI is doing the writing, where is the journalist, right? There was also something that came out of the Minnesota Journalism Center that was called the disclosure paradox. And this was the idea that we always try to be transparent and honest with our audience, but when a newsroom tells the audience that they used AI, trust slips by 30%. So sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. That's the paradox. There's just no good move there just yet. So here's some things I think we need to talk about more. Two things that keep me up at night when I think about AI in general, AI in journalism. I'm super concerned about the environmental cost. AI is very resource intensive. There are data centers that power it that consume enormous amounts of electricity and water. There's examples out there where large data centers, they go through millions of gallons of water a day just for cooling. Some communities are seeing utility bills going up because of the existence of this. So what do we do about it? Well, number one is just being aware of it. And again, this is where local matters. You know, I've been preaching that all semester long. Look at the way your local government is handling this. Are there data center deals that are being approved in your county or your city? What kind of tax breaks are these companies getting? And what is the community getting in return? That's a huge question here. So much happens without public input, and that in and of itself is a journalistic problem, right? That's local journalism territory. If you are going to do journalism, chase that story. The other thing that keeps me up at night about AI is corporate ethics. And we looked at that with Anthropic, right? The idea here that Anthropic walked away from a $200 million Pentagon contract because they refused to let their tool be used for autonomous weapons or for mass surveillance of Americans without warrants. And the administration punished them for that. Anthropic then sued. A federal judge here in California, as we discussed, agreed with them. A company drew a line, and it happened to be an AI company. And so I appreciate that. As I told you last week, I worked for an AI company as a writer and prompt engineer, 23 and 24. I told you I needed the money. And I really wanted to start to understand the technology from the inside. And they were hiring people with advanced degrees in very specific areas, and I felt like it was a good fit for me overall. I'm really not ashamed of it. I saw this AI train coming, and I'm like, well, I can get run over, or I can get on and try to, maybe maneuver this thing a little bit. I made some money. I'm not going to, stop the AI train. I think what I learned was that it was about the objective, not necessarily the tool's objective. It's about your objective, what you want to do. What are you trying to make? That's the whole situation here. Here's what's most concerning is I hear a lot of ick reactions to AI. I'm not touching that. I don't want it on my phone. That is your right. That is your choice. 100% support it. It's gross in a lot of ways. There's the environmental grossness, the ethical, the impact it has on creativity. But this ick reaction, this shunning of it, rejecting of it, denying it, is not a strategy to deal with it. You cannot ick the technology into not existing. You can't refuse it into a more comfortable version for yourself. The technology is here. It's being deployed right now. And the best reaction, the only one that works, is actually being intelligent and proactive with it. What does that mean? Well, be cognizant of the ethics that surround it. Think about the labor issues, the disclosure issues, the accuracy issues, the copyright issues. Many of these things we discuss throughout the semester. And it most certainly means being cognizant of the environmental costs, which I know a lot of students are, and that's probably the number one reason for the ick, or at least the performative ick. Look up what data centers are near you. Find out what your local government is approving and what your community is actually getting in exchange. Hold companies accountable when they're making decisions in relation to AI. And in your own use of it, and I'm going to talk more about this at the end of the show, be the human in the room. You've heard me say it before, you're going to hear it again and probably another time. Use it as a tool, not as a replacement for your thinking. Assistant, not a replacement. I use AI. I disclose how I use it. Next semester, I'm putting it in my syllabus, so it's out there for everybody. It's important for us to talk about it. It's important for us to acknowledge its existence. So that is segment one for my walk-off show here today. When we come back in segment two, after a quick break, we're going to talk about a term that I want all of you, please, to stop using. You might have a guess what it is. Let's discuss it when we come back. I'm Dr. Shermak. This is Media Mac. We'll be right back.
Stay connected to your campus. The Questonian has been Cuesta College's trusted news source since 1966. From breaking news to campus life, we cover the stories that matter to you. Follow us at The Questonian on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, or visit questonian.com.
Welcome back to Media Mac. Dr. Shermak here. On to segment two here in our wrap-up show for the semester. Before I get into anything else, I really want to give a shout out to you, my Journalism 200 students. I just finished grading the Week 13 discussion board where students were critiquing their own news sources. And I thought the work you did on that was really, really good. It gave me some excellent insights and really adds to what I want to talk about in this segment. Among those of you in class, NPR was your most picked news outlet by a mile. I thought that was great. Very hopeful. And what was even better is that even though you were choosing a news outlet that you trust, you didn't just pick it and move on. You went for some of the cracks. You went and looked at some of the issues with it. You brought up the Yuri Berliner suspension and NPR's own corrections process. Some of you looked into NPR's bias score on various websites that rate that sort of thing. An internal NPR stat about source diversity, the music plagiarism case from 2015 to 2018. And even the staff member who was terminated after they appeared on Fox News. That depth, that critical eye means you are really thinking about this, and I appreciate that. Many of you also chose the New York Times. And of course, you brought up Jason Blair from 2003, the Caliphate podcast controversy. Another student in class brought up USA Today and walked through the Gabriela Miranda fabrication scandal. By the way, if you don't know about these, I've created our Going Deep page on the class that kind of goes through some of these controversies. Some of you talked about switching over from the Washington Post because of the Bezos ownership. This is something we discussed earlier. Even a student who said TMZ was their favorite news source, which is a little cringy for my journalism soul. They even were honest about TMZ and said, yeah, they mix facts and commentary. The dirty secret about TMZ is they're usually right. We just don't like admitting it as journalists because their tactics are pretty unethical. All these scandals that were mentioned have to do with trust. And I think the most important part to point out here is that these scandals are well known. They're well documented. The people in these situations were caught. Most of them were caught and reported by the same outlets that were responsible for employing them. In the Jason Blair case, maybe one of the most famous false information stories in history, the New York Times ran a 7,000-word front-page apology about its own scandal. Gabriela Miranda at USA Today, they conducted their own internal investigation. They pulled 23 different articles down, and they were upfront about what happened. That's accountability in action. That's the accountability system working. The mechanism is built into journalism to do exactly what it was supposed to do, and it did. So the pivot here is this. I really want you to stop using the phrase fake news. I want the phrase fake news out of the vernacular for good. People in power use that phrase as a weapon. But more than that, when you use it, you sound uninformed. You sound inattentive. You sound kind of dumb. And I say that with the utmost love and in a protective posture. Think about what your words actually mean. When you call a story fake news, you are saying it's fabricated, made up, invented. That's what fake means. And this can happen. I mentioned Blair, I mentioned Miranda, Stephen Glass at the New Republic. In the late 90s, he fabricated entire articles. They did a movie about it, Shattered Glass. Every one of these examples ended careers and became massive scandals because real fabrication in news is highly unusual. When you have outlets that have editors and policies in place to prevent such a thing. Fake news does not happen often. Full stop. The American Psychological Association looked at this and they put it very plainly. Mainstream news outlets that have, robust safeguards in place, editing teams, correction policies, they don't really have these cases of quote unquote fake news. Where fake news actually lives is on social media. Misinformation in this country overwhelmingly originates and spreads on social media, not at original news outlets with staffs. That's why when someone says to me, I don't watch the news because it's fake news, I immediately assume they're an idiot. I really do. Stop doing that. Sometimes people who may have done a Google, quote unquote, research, I've heard people say, well, 40 to 60% of newspaper articles contain errors. Okay, let's presume that's true. But what are the actual errors? They're probably misspelled names, maybe the wrong date, numbers are transposed. Maybe a reporter said something happened on a Tuesday when it was a Thursday. Those are mistakes. And there's a huge difference between getting something wrong and inventing news, which is what fake news accuses folks of doing. And look, I'm not here to say that the journalism machine in this country isn't flawed. It is. There are narratives and there's framing and agenda setting out there that caters to particular countries, particular political parties, so on and so forth. But the mechanisms work. When the Associated Press gets something wrong, they publish a correction. The New York Times has a correction page you can read every single day. And guess what? There's going to be errors there every single day. The same is true of the Washington Post, Reuters, NPR. They have public corrections processes, and that's the system working exactly the way it is supposed to. Speaking of systems working as they are supposed to, let's go to Fox News. Because people on Fox News love to say how much fake news there is. What about the largest defamation settlement in American history? Dominion versus Fox. We talked about it last week, $787 million. Why did that happen? Because the internal emails from Fox showed that they were making false claims and they ran them anyway. That's actual fabrication. That's actual malice. That is actual fake news in the very real sense of the term. And guess what? The system caught them. The lawsuit worked. These are real damages. There's a huge difference between a real news outlet and Fox News and what Fox News was doing on the programs that ran this false information about Dominion. It's good to know that at least somewhere in this world there are some consequences. Again, when someone tells me that all news is fake, I presume them to be an idiot. We have to do better than this. You can't tell me the difference between a typo in the New York Times and a made-up tweet on a Facebook page that some guy made in his basement. That's not a sophisticated position on this topic, especially now that you've been through a media class. That is simply ignoring the way the system works or not knowing how it works. If you want to push back on a story, pick that story and push back on it. Say the reporter got a source wrong. Say the framing missed something. Maybe there's context that was not included. That is all absolutely fair. And that's what a critical, thoughtful reader does. And I was super happy to see that most of you did that in week 13 in that discussion. Keep doing that. But if your entire response to news is that all news is fake news, use your brain. There is enough to contend with in the actual information sphere without having to make up other issues. There's the algorithm. There's surveillance capitalism. Google, Meta, Amazon. 55% of all global ad spending goes through those companies. They love that algorithm. And the algorithm does not love you, and it certainly doesn't love democracy. It loves engagement. It loves when you're angry. It loves when you're sad. It loves when you keep scrolling. This is where the fake content lives. It's where it thrives. There's no editor. There's no correction policy. There's no name that gets called out when it turns out to be wrong. And I think the irony in all of this is, and this kills me, is that the people who scream the loudest about fake news, they're usually the one who are getting the most information from where fake news actually thrives and survives. How can you do better? Be intentional. We talked about it a couple weeks ago with Professor Gass. Be more intentional with your news consumption. Less scrolling, more visiting of news websites, reliable news websites. Go all the way back to week 1 of this class. I gave you kind of a toolkit to think about your consumption of news. Think about, why is the article being written? Why is this message out there? Did anyone pay for it? What do they want from it? What's being left out? And seriously, stop using the term fake news unless you actually mean someone fabricated something in the news. Because most of the time I hear this, people don't mean that. They basically mean that they didn't like what they just heard. We can do better. That was my goal this semester, is to get you to be better media consumers. Hopefully I've moved the needle just a little bit on that. Okay, sermon over. I hope you heard me. We're going to take our last commercial break of the semester. When we come back, we're going to get to the segment that I care about the most, and that is getting involved. Let's take a break. I'm Dr. Shermak. You're listening to Media Mac. We will be right back.
Want real journalism experience? Join the Questonian. Build your portfolio, develop professional skills, and tell the stories that matter to our campus. Enroll in JOUR 202 or 203 for 4 credits. Questions? Email thequestonian@questa.edu. The Questonian. Your story starts here.
Welcome back to Media Mac. Dr. Shermak here. It is our final episode, and we are in our final segment. And I told you at the top of the show today that this segment might be the one I care about the most, because really the entire semester sort of runs through this segment. All the talk about consolidation and labor and the disruptions and AI and fake news. What it comes down to is whether you, the person listening, decide to do something. We talk about calls to action when I teach public speaking, and I do teach public speaking if you need to take that class. Doing something about it. What's my call to action? I entered journalism because I felt the call to action. I asked a newspaper reporter when I was at my brother's baseball game, how do I do what you do? I like what you do. And you know what he said to me? He didn't tell me to go kick rocks or get away from me, I'm working. He said, we actually need some help. I never would have found that out if I didn't ask the question. Long story short, I send some writing samples. 3 weeks later, I'm covering stories for the newspaper. It was my first newspaper gig, and I turned it into a whole career. That was 30 years ago. The things that stayed with me from that are that I needed to be brave enough to ask even one question. And I carried that through my journalistic work. Because what I realized is that getting one question in often will start a cycle of conversation, of curiosity, inquiry. And once you get going on that, you learn very quickly that everyone has a story. And it's one of the neatest things about journalism. And I think the same thing is true of citizenship. The same thing is true of being a student. I want to go back to some numbers I shared with you in week 3. There are 212 counties in this country that have no local news sources. 50 million Americans live in what we know as news deserts. And the ramifications when local news disappears: lower voter turnout, fewer candidates run to office, democracy gets weaker. That is documented, that is proven. The other side to this, the side that gives me hope, 85% of Americans say local news matters to their community. 71% trust local news, 61% say it keeps an eye on local political leaders. That's what journalism is all about. People still want it. More good news, 300 new local news startups have launched in the last 5 years. I've told you about the organization Press Forward that has put grant money into more than 200 small newsrooms. Some states like Illinois passed a tax credit for retaining local journalists. People are starting things. States are stepping up. This is happening. This is work that's happening. I also told you about the Questonian and our content sharing partnership that we have with the SLO Tribune. Students right now, as I speak, are working on stories that will be published in the SLO Tribune. That's real local news. And it's happening right on this campus. And if you want to join that effort, come take the Questonian. Join the class, Journalism 202A or 203A, or send me a note. We're part of a great community that is doing the work. I also want you to hang on to what we talked about the last couple of weeks. The First Amendment, that 45-word document that outlines 5 freedoms: religion, speech, assembly, petition, and of course the press. And the press is the only profession mentioned in the United States Constitution. Not lawyers, not doctors, not soldiers. People who created it had just fought a war to protect those rights, and they knew how much it mattered. We talked about Tinker versus Des Moines and how you don't lose your First Amendment rights when you walk on a campus. Those are rights you have. Can you use them? Will you use them? I think where this all comes together when we talk about the themes from today's show, AI, fake news, getting involved, something I want to leave you with as a student, heck, as anyone, a thinker, so on and so forth. You need to start looking at college like you do going to the gym. Let me explain. You don't get stronger by watching someone else lift at the gym. And you don't get stronger by reading a book about lifting. And you sure as hell don't get stronger by having a robot lift the weight for you while you stand next to it scrolling on your phone. The only way you get stronger is by picking up the weight, putting it down again and again and again. It's the reps. The reps are the whole point. The reps are the workout. College is reps. This class is reps. Journalism is reps. Citizenship is reps. You build your mental muscles by writing that terrible first draft. By being that nervous person walking into an interview to interview another nervous person. You sit through what you perceive to be a boring class or a boring meeting, or read an article you disagree with or that you also find boring. You do the reps by asking questions that you might have been afraid to ask. AI cannot do those things for you. It can show you what the finished workout looks like. It can produce something that looks like something that someone made who has those skills, but you don't have those skills unless you do it. AI is just a picture of someone else lifting. This is why I don't let students use AI on their work in my classes. My policy is not about being a jerk or being scared of the technology. It's about wanting you to be stronger, to be better when you leave than when you walked in week one. And what I fear, what I'm starting to see as an educator, and I've been teaching, as I always say, for 23 years now, it'll be 23 years in December, is I'm worried about students who are here just checking boxes, who are checking boxes and just getting it done without immersing themselves in thought, critical thinking, reflection. Because honestly, it's kind of silly. If you're only here so you can get to the next step and you're only here to make more money, I really want you to think about why you are here. Because if you're only here to check some boxes and get a piece of paper and get a degree so you can go make money, just go make money. All right. I grew up in a household. My dad worked for 48 years in tool and die. He went through training, but he doesn't have a liberal arts degree. My younger brother is in the same career path. He's been doing that since he was 15 years old. My dad and my brother are brilliant people who I think would have absolutely crushed it in college. They would have loved it, but that's not what they wanted to do. They knew exactly what they wanted to do, and they just went out and did it. And I'm inspired by them always. I have deep respect for that path, for them or for anyone who does it. There are careers right now that pay extremely well that do not require a college degree. Electricians clear 6 figures in most markets, especially out here in California. Plumbers, we need plumbers. There's a shortage. HVAC, welders, CDL certified truck drivers. We have a program at Cuesta. Elevator mechanics, wind turbine technicians. I'm just listing some of these. Real estate. In real estate, you need a license. You don't need a degree. Real jobs, real money, and we need a lot more people in them. And there's absolutely no shame in that. I think about this a lot when I ask students, hey, have you done the reading? And I get eye rolls. When I assign a reading before a lecture and people come in and it's clear as day they haven't done the reading. Guess what? The reading is the journey. The reading is the destination. I'm tired of the eye rolls. I'm tired of the AI summaries. I'm tired of writing a quiz on Canvas and knowing damn well that everyone took it using AI because we got a 97% average. I'm just saying the thing out loud. If your only goal is to make money, then you're off to a horrible start. If your only goal is to make money, college is a bad investment. You're paying tuition and giving up 2, 3, 4, maybe more years of earning potential for something maybe you don't actually need to achieve that goal of making money. And if all you're doing is sitting in class using AI to check your boxes faster, you are paying for an education and then paying AI to do the education for you. Can't you see this? It's a terrible investment. You're starting from behind. Don't do that. But if you are here to think, If you are here to grow, to become someone that you weren't 2 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever it may be, then put in the reps. Do the work. Sit in the discomfort of not knowing something yet. That's how you grow. Getting involved means doing the reps of being a citizen. Kind of bringing this back to our class. Show up. Subscribe to one newspaper. You can get educational discounts all over the place. Go to a public meeting. Go to a city council meeting. Go to a school board meeting. If you're a Cuesta student, come to the Board of Trustees meeting. Maybe ask one question. Talk to a stranger who's there. Hey, take a journalism class again. You already done that once. Come back for more. Take a political science class. You already know Professor Gass. You don't have to become a journalist. I'm not here recruiting, even though I am a little. But the thing you are required to be is what you already are, and that is a citizen. And that part is not optional in a democracy. Nobody can do those reps for you either. Look, I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna, even though I sound like one a lot. I understand what's happening out there. I've been talking about the state of the world and the state of this industry for 15 weeks. But this class always teaches me something, or at least reminds me of something. And that is the people who built all the stuff we've talked about this semester, the newspapers, the radio, television, internet, AI, video games, they were not gods. They were people who made decisions. People make decisions. People make action. You are people. You can make decisions. You can ask questions. You can show up. And I hope over the course of these last 15 weeks, I gave you some tools to show up, to be a citizen, to be a person. A few reminders before we check out. Final exam closes May 22nd, 11:59 p.m. Don't wait until the last day. Get it done sooner. Read and React 5 is up. That's for you to complete. It's a self-assessment. Doesn't mean it's optional. It's required. I'm asking you to pick one thing from the semester that sticks with you. I also have an end of semester survey up. I would love to hear your feedback on the class. It's anonymous, and hey, I'll throw you some extra credit if you do it. And I really mean it when I say, please keep in touch. Reach out. If you go on to take more journalism classes, if you transfer somewhere with a great program, if you end up working in something media adjacent and you want to stop by and talk shop down the road, please drop me a line. I love hearing where students end up, and maybe I'll get lucky and be able to be your professor once again. And hey, if you have something to share about this class, good or bad, head over to Rate My Professor. I know how it works. Students look at it. It actually helps quite a bit. So your feedback really matters, and I know your fellow students appreciate that. Don't also forget the Ask Me Anything board is live for the next few days. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Media Mac. I'm Dr. Shermak. It's been a real pleasure spending this semester with you. Take care of yourself and those around you. So long, everybody.